So let's get to the promise of what we said we'd do today. We're going to show you a Hemingway trick. We're going to do a recap of last week's meta prompting, and we're going to talk about the special offer coming up, and we'll see what else comes along. All right. So let's start with, excuse me, the meta prompting. Now, what I found was this. When I use this meta prompt to develop my outline, it gives me a lot more detail for the outline than what my standard outline generator does. And with that greater amount of detail and what we call our pre-prompt, I get a significantly larger chapter. So instead of being the 900 to 1,000 words in the chapter, I'm getting more like 1,800 words per chapter. And it was just a nice surprise. All right, so the prompt looks like this. And put into Gemini, Google's Gemini, and I'm using the 2.5, it's going to go out and do a lot of research for whatever it is we're going to write. Right? So what I'm going to do here, the example I'll use is we're growing a vegetable garden. And so once you run this the first time, it's going to come up with this list of things that it's going to ask you for. And if it doesn't put them into a list, just say, prompt me in a number of lists. So I'm going to go through here and I'm just going to answer these questions. So number one is growing a vegetable garden. Two. Okay, so wants to know what writing style I would use, and I'm going to say narrative. Three. Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. Let me go ahead and share my screen for you. I'd like to tell you that's the first time I forgot that, but over hundreds of webinars, I've got it plenty. Okay, and I'm going to say share the entire screen. Okay. So we're filling in the pieces here, and we've done the topic, the narrative, target audience. Going to say adults who appreciate sustainable living. Number four, goal. What is the main objective of the book? What should the reader know, feel, or be able to do after reading it? The reader should have a detailed knowledge of growing vegetables. I'm just kind of making this up as I go along. Five, tone. What is the desired overall tone? Let's make it inspiring. And six, story framework. Now, in a how-to book, you don't necessarily need a story framework, but I'm going to go ahead and make this, let's see, hero's journey. And I remember that so it doesn't get used. Seventh one is it wants to know a target word count, so I'm going to say 40,000. I'm going to run that. And this is going to go ahead and create my outline for me. So the reason we call this meta prompting is because we're using a prompt to create a prompt. Right? And I find that to be very useful. I do the same thing when we're doing our creating our pre-prompts, using a prompt to create the prompt. I do the same thing for our system prompts. I use a prompt to create the prompt. And we've really tried to boil this down and make it pretty simple. We'll take a look at software. That. Okay. So here's the chapter blueprint that's come up with, and it's still working. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to sign in to install. Now, mind you, we could have done, and I mostly have in the past, created the outline inside Advanced Author. I can create it with little more than a title. However, instead of load my profile up, okay, go to outline and generate a new outline. And it'll take me to this screen here. Let's go back and look at our prompt again. It has decided that there are going to be 40 chapters, right? But this is how I use that information. I'll come up here and I'll copy this. If I come over to Advanced Author, let's see, we'll call this growing vegetables master class, and we'll make this simple. We'll call it nonfiction. And here's where I'm going to put that number of chapters. Now, had I specified that I let this generate the outline for me, whatever number I specified, it would have come up with that number of chapters. And I'm going to take this right here, which is book description. I'm going to paste everything from that outline into it. scroll down. Now, an interesting thing that happens here is we have a place here where we can add characters. If we go back to the outline that we just created, it has a character roster. And I could have gone in and created characters for each of these first. So if I take a look here, and I see we have the hero in the story, we have the mentor, the guide, seasoned gardener. It's put a whole bunch of different characters that I have not yet created. So I would probably want to go create these characters first, and I'll show you where I would do that. But without having done that yet, let me go ahead and let it generate this outline. Once I had those characters, I can click here, I can choose them and add them to the story. I'm going to scroll down a little more, and it says, am I using a story template? Well, I did. I used the hero's journey. And the AI model, I want to go ahead and do this in 4.0 Mini. And the language, we have 16 different languages that this will generate in, and you can change it right here. I'm going to do this in English. And because this book is based on reality, I'm going to set the temperature down here to 0.1. Let me go ahead and let this person in call. Where are you? Welcome, Brad. Okay. So getting back to where I was over here, I've gone ahead and I've told it this is a model I want to use, and I want to do this in the English language. And I've set my temperature for reality. I haven't picked any characters because I didn't go and set any up. And I'm just going to say generate the outline. And it's going to go to work. I've got generating the outline that the actual book generation will come from. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask them at this point. This will only take a minute or two. I'm not going to generate this book. I'll show you how it's done, but I'm not going to generate this book because each one of these chapters is submitted automatically one at a time once we tell it to generate a book. And it takes about a minute per chapter to come up with the output. We do that intentionally so that we can use our entire range of prompts and not run out of context. So, okay, so let's see what we've got here. Our outline, this is all the information we pasted in from our meta prompts. The outline itself looks like this. Now, had I, excuse me, let's go again, let's take a look up. If I had added the characters to the outline, what would happen is this would be telling me what chapters each character appears. Okay. The same is true of research. We have a research module, but this is what it looks like for using enhanced meta prompts that gave us the information we needed. Just a couple little things. We've got a thing here for generating a sales page, and it will generate a sales page for this particular book, and it'll do it in the voice of Dan Kennedy. Let's go take a look at what we didn't do on the character side. Here's the characters. And here's how the character scenario works. We come over and we tell it that we want to create a character, and we can give the character a name. We can decide the role that it's going to play in the story. This is mostly applicable to fiction. We can create a summary about the character, gender, pronouns, and there's whole bunches of information that we can put in about the character. Or we can be really lazy. I designed this for people who are really lazy because that describes me. This is the only place that you don't choose what AI you want. You're going to automatically choose OpenAI, the model 409. If you click Generate Vitals, it will go in here and it will create a character for you with different traits and whatnot. And then you can come along and you can edit it. So it's meant to save you time. And then you can click this create character button and it will save what you've done. If you don't, that character will never show up. Right? So that's how that works. So what have we talked about? We talked about the meta prompting and how we demonstrated how we use meta prompting to generate a prompt that would create our outline for us. Software could do the outline, but this is going to give you a more comprehensive outline, especially doing it inside of Gemini. Okay. Let's see what our next Google Gemini thing is over here because I have to get off the top of my head. Our Hemingway trip. Okay, this is pretty cool. So here's how you do this. You go into Gemini, and once again, I'm using Gemini because it has a context window of 2 million. And I could do this inside the software. We have a place for AI chat. But if you've got access to Gemini for free or you're paying for a subscription, why pay twice? You can do it here. So I asked the question, what are the Hemingway rules of writing? And it turns around and it lists them all out for me, okay? And the reason that I do this is to get us both on the same page, myself and the AI. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a file for this, just for fun. We're not going to run all the way through it because the AI will stop periodically and I'll have to ask it to continue. But let's see, say add a file, upload files, and I'm going to grab another version of the book that we just created, or a book from the outline we just created would be a better way of saying it. Creating a vegetable growth. Okay. What I'm going to say is, I would like you to rewrite each chapter of this book, of this manuscript, using the Hemingway rules listed above. Do not change the meaning of the chapter. And we'll just wait for for the start of an output here so that you can see what happened. It says, okay, I'll rewrite each chapter of your manuscript using the Hemingway rules we discussed. This means focusing on short sentences, vigorous English, eliminating superfluous words, using adjectives sparingly, and aiming for a more direct showing style where possible without altering the original meaning of the chapters. Here's the rewritten manuscript. It's going to go through this, and it's going to do it a chapter at a time. There's chapter 1. Here's chapter 2. And somewhere along probably chapter 5 or chapter 6, it's going to come back and it's going to pause. And I'm going to say, please continue with chapter whatever the next one is. And it'll keep going. Okay. So after you've gone through and you've run the QC prompts that we talked about in our first webinar, and you've got the writing pretty much the way you want it in terms of the story that you want to tell, here you can turn around and always keep a backup of everything. But you can run this through Gemini with this prompt and have it converted into Hemingway style.
Question?
Yes, Brad.
Why did you pick Hemingway versus other authors for a particular niche?
I demonstrated the use of Hemingway. Hemingway is known for the Hemingway rules of writing. Is there another author who has a set of rules that you would rather?
Well, here's what I would ask. Maybe add it to your application, which is have it read the outline and what niche you're trying to write to, and say what are the top 5 authors in this niche who are bestsellers and world-renowned for doing this, and then based on that come up with the rules for them. So it might be Stephen King, it might be someone else, and then come up with the same set of rules for that particular niche and apply it, maybe even using all 5 to get different versions of your output, since you're using Gemini for free, and have something that's more specifically appropriate for the book that you're writing. Just a thought.
That's an interesting point. So let's go back to this first prompt for a moment. Okay, this gave me the go down a bit. This does give me some specifics to go look at in terms of the research that it did on the topic, right? So this may be a place to go and look for some of what you're talking about.
And since you're doing the same type of research on your niche, I think I saw you go right past something that talked about the story structure. So both picking a story structure and a representative author or someone you wanted to emulate, that would be something I would think would be useful to use the AI for, to say, okay, this is what I'm going for. Here's the target market I'm trying to reach, age group, et cetera, et cetera. Who are their favorites? What story structure resonates best with them? And therefore, I want to go through that because it's a proven winner.
Right. There are 7, I think there's 6 or 7 story frameworks that I've got built into the software, and I have them all represented in the prompt. And so you could certainly go through and get examples of each of those for what authors use them. And you could modify your prompts to say, in the style of this particular author. There's a post inside of the group where it talks about the limits of Nth author. And what I say right up front is, I don't know the limits of install. Okay. Every day, practically, I come up with a new way that I can use it. All right. Something else that comes along. It wasn't part of my initial plan to generate outlines outside of install. All right. But I started playing around with the prompting, and I started seeing what the results of that were. Much richer descriptions on a chapter by chapter basis, which led to longer content. And I says, well, you know what? I actually like this better. Now, it wouldn't always be appropriate. This is appropriate for something you want to do research on, right? Would it necessarily be appropriate for fiction? And whatever Ernst author comes up with on its in the outline itself. Let's scroll down to that. What we just came up with. Oh, we're sitting over on character. Excuse me a moment. Let me get us back to outlines. Welcome, Karen. Okay, back to where I was. All right. So I'm going to come down here to, I think we call this growing a vegetable garden. Growing vegetables, master class here. Okay. If I come over here to the edit, one of the things that I can do here, and this is why I recommend use an inexpensive model first. Inexpensive model may do the whole job for you. I will tell you that the cheapest model out there is DeepSeek, and it's much cheaper than anybody else, right? But it's not necessarily going to give you the quality you want to start with. I like to always start with 4.0 Mini. But see, I can come in here and I can edit all of this stuff right here. And then when I take it over to where we actually write it, whatever I wanted to include here is here. And as I said, we had this, we did not go through, because I didn't anticipate doing it the way we did it. We didn't go through and create all of our characters first, which if you get that outline from the outside, creating those characters first is a good idea. So that when you come over here and you added your characters and then you tell it to generate, it's already decided what chapters they need to be in. This is going to get you frequently. This is going to get you 90+% there. I like to say that 80% of this will 80% of this is done, and the other 20% is your touch. But when it comes to writing things that are factual, things that, you know, like growing a vegetable garden, whatever, if your prompts are right to begin with, then you're going to get a very high quality output. And that's what your prompting is going to tell you. All of these things that I show you outside of InstAuthor are things that I've simply come up with, and where we apply it inside of InstAuthor has just been some experimentation, you know, that we've been happy with. But there is no reason that, you know, you need to do things my way. This is a completely flexible system.
Just another thought on that, which is And I'm stealing this idea from a GPT that I saw that was really interesting, but I can't remember what it was. It was for art creation, and I was doing some graphic novel stuff, and so I used Claude to come up with a detailed description of what I wanted the image to look like, and it was very long. And I put the image, I put the prompt into various tools to try to generate the image, and it kept coming back. This is way too long, can't do it. And I found this other application that basically took the prompt that I was trying to create and boiled it down to its essence and came up with tremendous images. So my point here is that there's a lot of value in doing a prompt evaluation. You mentioned that if the prompt is correct, well, that is a big if. So there's a lot of value in coming up with a prompt that says, how can I boil this down to its essence and make it an outstanding prompt for what I'm trying to do? And that was, to me, like a breakthrough for what this guy did on this GPT. And it creates the best images I've ever seen.
One call it cheap and dirty trick that we've done that's once again worked very well for how-to stuff is we've gone through and we've taken the chapters one at a time, the chapter descriptions out of the outline, and taken it over to ChatGPT and ask it for an image that's representative of this description. And sometimes it nails it, sometimes it's off a bit, but if you've got a ChatGPT subscription, you don't really care, because if you don't like what it gave you, you can modify it a little bit, modify what's going into the prompt, and you're not spending any extra money.
Yeah, but
Go
my
ahead.
point is, I'm sorry. My point is that perhaps there's some value in doing an evaluation of the prompt the person provides. So, some questions that were asked were, what are you trying to achieve with this? Or, is this concise enough, or is this a lot of, is this going to create hallucinations? This person, I wish I could have cracked his code, because that was a very interesting approach he had. And if I can come up with the name of it, I'll send it to you, Jeff. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Let me show you something so I can give you an idea what I'm talking about. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
I've just hit the generate book site, and as I said, I'm not going to generate a book because this is 40 chapters. But inside of this, okay, the first thing we do is we're going to specify whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And the reason being is because the algorithm for determining the quality of a manuscript changes between fiction and nonfiction, right? In a nonfiction, it's more concerned about the accuracy of the information that's being put forward. In the fiction side, it's more concerned about the consistency of the story. If a guy's got a magic wand in chapter 3, you don't necessarily want that magic wand to appear as a magic saber in chapter 7, right? So it goes through and it looks for those kinds of things. Now that's an example of something that it might not catch, because the list of things is infinite. But where we first came into it was we had a character who he started off, he was working in an office, and he wanted to go out and try living off grid. And then initially in chapter 7 or chapter 8, he was talking about his job at the hardware store, right? And so we went back to the drawing board on tightening that information up and actually creating it's an automatically created database, so that when it generates, as an example, chapter 5, it goes back and it reads chapter 1 through 4. And when it generates chapter 6, it reads chapters 1 through 5, to try to maintain that consistency. Okay. So what happens here on this page where the book is actually generated? We pick the genre, we choose the reading level. I'm going to warn you, I'm going to tell you something about choosing a reading level. If you're right, this is embarrassing, but in the United States, the I think it's 65% of the population reads at or below a 6th grade level. Okay, that's just a sad fact. And so we typically write things for a middle school level, but you could write it for any level. But if you write something for a middle school level, and you don't tell the AI that this is meant for adults at a 6th grade reading level or at a middle school reading level, then it will turn around and write it as though it was writing for somebody in middle school. Does that make sense? It'll be much more of a story output to make it more educationally engaging. All right. So then
that's an excellent. I'm sorry. That's an excellent point. And the question I would have is, for a particular niche you're writing, if you're choosing whether or not to write it at a high school level or 6th grade level, whatever, the question I would ask is, do people at 6th grade level read this type of niche book, and try to come up with some information on that so you can pick the right level that you're writing to. So, for example, when I'm writing a supernatural horror story that has implications for societal issues, I'm not going to write it for a 5th grade level. I'm going to write it for a high level, because I think 5th grade level people just wouldn't be interested in that type of story. So just a thought in terms of how you question, how do you get to the point where you question what level you're writing to? And I think there has to be perhaps some calculations behind that to see, do these people even read this type of book? Just a thought.
I think it is a valid thought, but let's think about it for a moment, right? Let's say you're writing a science fiction book. Okay, now there are lots of adults who enjoy science fiction. All right, but as I said, 60% of the market in the U.S. is reading at or below a 6th grade level. So if I write a science fiction book at a university level, then they're probably going to have a hard time following. So you're right; it's a balancing act. You've got to decide where that falls. And we had when we were setting up the outline to begin with, there was also a place there for what the reading level is. Okay, let's go down a little further in this, and I'll show you some of what I'm talking about. I do pre-prompts specific to the topic that I'm doing, or I leave the pre-prompt blank. Now, the reason I came up with the pre-prompt is I have an original pre-prompt that makes everything a little bit controversial. The problem with AI, one of the problems with AI, is that when it writes something, it tries to be not biased. Okay? It tries to give you an even thing on both sides. Well, that really makes, to me, for boring writing. The best writing I've done myself has been when I've been pissed off about something. I have an opinion about something, right? And I want to convey that opinion, and that's not what it would normally give you. So I have a meta prompt that I use that helps me create controversial stuff. And the difference is, if you ask AI to evaluate it, and it was wrote by AI, normally it'll come back and it'll say, this was 80 to 90% created by AI, right? On the flip side, when I use one of my pre-prompts, it'll come back and it'll say, there's a 25% chance that parts of this were written by AI, because it doesn't show all of the hallmarks of being wrote by AI, like trying to be valid. Another thing that happens, and I'm gonna diverge on the topic for just a moment so I can get this out. I put a post up about Claude 4, and in that post I talked about how Claude 4 in the laboratory, they have shown where if what they call some MCPs enabled, and you ask it to do something that it considers to be immoral, it has the ability to notify the authorities and the press. Okay, and I don't want AI deciding what's moral or immoral. Well, you would think, well, I'm not going to do anything that would be immoral. And just to give you an example, on last week's webinar, one of the attendees, I went ahead and I asked out the group, I says, okay, give me a topic for creating a book on. And guy came back with what he basically said was a handbook for teenage boys dating teenage girls. And I happen to know this guy, and I know he's got a 15-year-old son, so I understood his intent. The AI came back and told me that it could not produce that type of an outline for that type of book. Okay. Now you can just imagine that maybe you're writing a story about something that's got a terrorist plot, and Claude turns around and decides, oh my goodness, this person has bad intentions, and maybe they don't do it today. Maybe you haven't got the MCP hooked up in your account today, but 2 weeks from now you do, because you're trying to automate something in the business. Okay. And it takes that opportunity to turn around and report this. And the next thing you know, you're on some, quiet skies flight list. So my bottom line there is I will not be paying for Claude 4. Okay. So here we have our pre-prompt, and this is whatever we decide to put in here. And all of these you can completely change yourself. But then we get down to the system prompt. And I have a whole bunch of system prompts that I've created. You can create your own. And during the first webinar, we showed people, and I believe it's in the prompting classroom section, how you can create your own using our initial meta prompts. But you can really do it any way you want. But I had a couple things on this that I thought were kind of cute. Now you saw gardening came up as a default, and that's because we have a default section in the profile. I'll show you in a moment. But here's a section where this is if I wanted to write a story for the Blacklist. Okay, and so the system prompt has the information about the Blacklist, and the characters that I wanted to create, I would go add to the characters section. I've got another one on here. I don't know if either of you are Trekkies, but I've got one here for I'll go in there for science fiction, but I'm sure I have one for Star Trek. There we go. There's Star Trek. It says, you're a seasoned Star Trek historian and storyteller, fully immersed in the lore, ethos, and stylistic nuances of the Star Trek universe. Draw from the Federation's ideals, the tapestry of interstellar diplomacy, and the complex moral challenges faced by diverse species. Craft a narrative or a set of them that reflects the spirit of exploration, the pursuit of knowledge, and the respect for life and cultural diversity. Begin by establishing a setting consistent with Star Trek canon whether aboard a Federation starship, a starbase, or on a newly encountered planet, introduce characters who embody Starfleet values, cooperation, curiosity, and ethical leadership, include encounters with familiar species, Vulcans, Klingons, Cardassians, or introduce new ones that expand the universe while maintaining logical consistency and technological plausibility. Weave in thematic dilemmas, diplomatic negotiations, first contact protocols, prime directive considerations that challenge the crew's integrity and growth, balance science-driven problem solving, character development, and meaningful dialogue. The final narrative should not only entertain, but also reflect the progressive ideals, moral complexity, and boundless imagination that define Star Trek. Now, I've gone through the trouble of reading all that to you because that would be applied against the outline. So the
May I just
outline, a
say,
chapter at a time, comes in, and then this system prompt takes it and runs with it. Okay.
that is a beautifully written prompt, and
I'd love to take
uh,
credit for it, but the AI wrote it. All right.
that's I mean that in itself has tremendous value. What you just said, I have to go back and look at your prior thing where you
But
talked about
webinar,
prompts, but
yeah.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, but you see how when I say when I talk about the prompting itself, right? You can change things considerably by one minor change. As an example, let's say we were talking about generating an outline. I'm going to give you an example, just to completely bring this home. Okay, so I'm going to come up here to outlines, and I'm going to say generate a new outline. And I'm not going to paste anything in like I did before. Okay, I'm just going to take something and I'm going to give it. We're going to do the same thing twice. So I'm going to say growing tomatoes. Those of you who are overseas spell tomatoes differently. And I'm going to put this in the nonfiction category. Okay, and I'll say it has 12 chapters, and I'm not going to tell it anything else. I don't want to bias what I want it to come out with. Let's come down here, and for our AI model, I'm going to go down and choose 4.0 mini, no template, 0.1 on the temperature, generate out. Let's see what it comes up with. And I think I've got a default 12 chapters. Yes. Give it just a moment. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Chapter 1, Introduction to Tomato Growing. Chapter 2, Choosing the Right Varieties. Chapter 3, Preparing Your Garden for Tomatoes. Chapter 4, Planting Techniques. Chapter 5, Water and Fertilization. Chapter 6, Pest and Disease Management. You get the idea, right? Okay, so that's how that came out with that particular setup that I gave it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up top, and I'm going to say back to profile. I'm going to go in to generate another outline, and I'm going to give it a completely different title called Growing Tomatoes. Hence, this is exactly the same as I did it before. Only here on the genre, I'm going to choose, let's choose, I think I've got some science fiction here. Ah, apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic. And we'll see what kind of difference. So once again, I'm going to give it no clues about what I want. I'm going to bump this up to a 0.3 just for fun. I'm going to say generate the outline. Something says failed to something. I can't see it because of this. Is this movable? It is. Failed to generate outline. Oh, we get back to 4.0 mini. I don't think that that's supposed to be that model that is here is supposed to be active. Okay, so now it's generating. Let's see what happens. Okay, so in chapter 1, the world ravaged by climate disasters and societal collapse, we meet our protagonist, Maya, a resilient botanist who has survived in a small, overgrown community. See what happens with that one minor little change of deciding what we're writing for, right? You can imagine what you could change with change in prompting. The questions.
So just, I love what you're doing with the different styles and the prompts that you're creating for those. So, uh, just one thought or suggestion perhaps is that you could say to the system and do this at the back end. Okay, look at the various niches that are best, most profitable bestsellers within Amazon KDP, and come up with the top 5 authors and basically uh, provide a prompt that writes in those styles for that particular niche, and then generate. There's hundreds of niches within KDP, so give a structure where you could break down, okay, I want to do fiction. Well, okay, I want to do supernatural fiction. I want to do supernatural horror, and drill down and sort of have a ranking in terms of how hot that is as a topic area, and allow people to have a better guidance to pick the particular prompt that they want to write their story in based on that. In other words, what you're doing is I'm sure you have this in your head. You're providing guidance on even the brainstorming of what you're going to aim towards, and you're giving them some upfront information about how popular or how potentially popular this framework is going to be, and rather than letting them try to pick it off the top of their head based on what they like to write about, giving them some information in terms of, are you wasting your time writing a growing tomatoes book for a medical thesis or something like that? So what is the popularity of all these different things, and sort of based on what they want to do, if they want to make a lot of money or they just want to write for fun, based on that, here's some guidance in terms of what you should be thinking about. It's just a thought about what I would try to do.
Okay, you bring up a couple of interesting things for me to show you, right? One is I have this screen here that looks a lot like ChatGPT, only you can pick whatever model is available that you want to do for it, and you can ask it whatever questions you want to ask it. I prefer to use stuff on the outside of this that I'm not paying for the API key on, right? But your point is well taken. And this is where the second thing comes in. I have been debating in my head, and it can come about in one of two ways, but I have thought about putting another menu option up that is simply a library of prompts. So I have created as you go through and you look in through the group, I created some other prompts and whatnot that I use for different things, right? But I've considered, should I put a library button and have all of those prompts stored one after another? Now, if I put a library button there, do I only allow prompts to show up in that library that I had put there, right? Or do I allow other people to make their own contribution, or have a separate scenario for them to be able to save their prompts? There can be some problems with that, as you can imagine, because you wouldn't want somebody going in and changing tried and true prompts that other people like, as they are. So I haven't fully decided on that. I'm looking for feedback, but that's one way of handling what you're talking about, is having a prompt that goes and looks at the market. And that's one of my, let's see.
Well, what you're talking about is basically open sourcing prompting for your application, which is a great idea. Community, you just have to do what GitHub does in terms of version control. So, basically you could say this is open up and I'm going to basically allow this application to progress much faster because I'm going to get inputs from a lot of smart people. And if they make a change to the prompt, well, I'll have revisions and variations or versions, I should say, of this that people can sort of skim through based on, an overview of what that version does. And I think that adds a lot of value.
Yeah, I'd be thrilled for people to submit stuff for review to be checked. There are malicious characters out there that I wouldn't want stuff destroyed, right? Something else I wanted to show you while we're here is I have I have a few things. This is one of our people put a message and says, I don't like to read in dark mode. So we went ahead and we added a light mode. All right. I don't like to read in light mode. So I'll go back to dark mode. Here we have defaults. And these defaults only come into play on the book generation page. Okay. So if there's a particular default system prompt or you wanted to create your own here, a default temperature you want to use, a default pre-prompt for your project, a default reading level, you can put those in here, default additional instructions. This is something that I put in to humanize the writing. And then you can save those book defaults. And that will automatically be there every time you go to generate a book. Okay. So the other thing I'd like to say is this. I used to write a lot of automation software for the IN crowd. And without a doubt, every single product that I put out was made better by the user. Okay, so I am looking for your feedback. I'm looking to hear what you had to say, because this will get better because of it. And that light and dark was a minor example, but somebody said they wanted it, so we put it in. Welcome, Robin. All right, so we have talked about using the meta prompting to generate chapters. We have talked about how we can use, in this particular case, we let the AI tell us what the Hemingway rules were, and then we let it turn around and rewrite the individual chapters for us. what happened to the rest of that? We were both watching it generate up, and I'm not seeing where those results are now. We talked a little bit about InstAuthor and the flexibility of the prompting, and why we choose between fiction and nonfiction on the book generation page, because it has to do with how we go through and validate if you're using our scoring prompts, which I recommend you do, because who knows what you're going to put in the book that I'm not accounting for. And have Google Gemini. Google Gemini right now is the best out there. But you could have Google Gemini make very specific suggestions for you on how you can make each of your manuscripts better. Okay. The last thing I have to cover, I realize I'm a little bit over right now, but the last thing I have to cover is there's a post up, and I want to make you aware of this. To the people who are members of the group, we're going to run a special until July 1. First off, whether you lay down $1 or not, you've got free usage until July 1. All right. For 100 folks, we're going to give them a lifetime discount of 35%, which is going to bring you down to like $30.55 a month. We also have a special on a yearly and on a lifetime deal. There'll only be 25 lifetime deals ever sold. If I thought this was sustainable on a lifetime, I would go put it on AppSumo, but I don't. I don't think it's sustainable. There's a hard cost in terms of the processing cycles on Google system. That's where we're hosted. Sorry, you could make it. Anyway, that's where the details are, and they boost your writing with the 30-day IA Writing Tool Showdown. I didn't do any research before I started this project. And I didn't do that because I didn't want to create a Me Too product. So I built the stuff that I wanted it to do, and then I built the stuff to create things that I hadn't taken into account originally. This wasn't really designed to write fiction, and I hadn't thought about the complexities of it. And then, you get asked a couple of questions, and you go in and you do what you have to do. And so we dealt with a lot of that, but you guys will make this better. What was I? By the way, I'm 63. Almost forgot how old I am. I'm 63. So I have a lot of those senior moments. Mid-sentence, I lose my train of thought. Go into a room looking for something, and I have to leave. Remember what I came in looking for. But anyway, this is the nature of the software. So I did some research after the fact. Perplexity has a new tool that will do deep research, and I've had it run deep research on the competition and on what's missing. And it comes back, and it's interesting because some of the things that it says are missing that nobody has, and of course it doesn't know about my software, is in some of the prompting that I've given, right? Some of the prompting that checks the quality of what you're doing, or that type of thing. That it says this isn't built in anywhere, and that's part of the reason why I'm considering the prompting library built into the software itself. Okay, at 12 minutes past the top of the hour, anybody have any questions for
me? That prompting thing is key. I think that is your distinguishing characteristic for this application. And it's not just a library of prompts, but perhaps it's the process to help people develop prompts. So asking a series of questions, there's some tools that help people develop that. You might want to look at those and see what you can steal from those concepts. They're really good.
I have considered, and I don't know if it would do any good, but I've considered um, putting all the prompts behind a box to make sure that the people who are grabbing them are at least people who have tried out the software. I guess what I most want to avoid is educating my competition, because I'm surprised at some of the things that I don't see it saying them have. I do see that there are some competitors out there for $9 a month, and I see that there are competitors that are $2,000 down and $1,400 a month. So there's a wide spectrum. I watched a demo 2 3 weeks ago of a guy. I don't even remember the product, and probably wouldn't say its name if I did, but it looked like it was writing pieces of chapters. You gave it something and it continued writing, and you gave it something else and it continued writing. This is more let me take as much information from you as I can, and then we're going to spit something out that's fairly complete, and you can decide what changes you want to make to it. If you want to go in and modify the outline and have another throw at it, you can do that. So it's a different workflow, that's for sure. It's a different workflow, and this is not only for the people who are looking to write the next great American novel, or the how to grow tomatoes. It's for the people who need to write a book to establish authority to help them in their business. The people who want to turn around and create lead magnets, right? I've seen some very inexpensive tools out there for lead magnets, but I've never been impressed with their quality. Not yet.
Just one final thought, which is, when I'm writing one of my novels that I'm working on, at each step I go through, I throw it to a panel of judges and ask it, here's the rubric I want you to use. How am I doing for the outline, for the brainstorming, for the chapters, whatever. And, the power of AI is to be able to give you feedback along the way and enhance from the very beginning. And that might be something that you find useful.
Have a look at the prompts that we have posted that goes and checks the quality of your manuscript. My advice would be, I don't know, do you have access to OpenAI at a premium?
The $200 or $100 one?
No. You can get it with a $20 one.
Yeah, I have that.
Okay. So what you can do is you can take the prompt that I have developed, and you can use the what do they call that? The O3.
Mm-hmm.
Use the O3 and tell it how you would like to modify it to look for the thing you're talking about. Follow me? And it'll go through and it'll grade your manuscript at whatever position it's currently in.
Here's where I'm coming from on this. So I teach a course on new venture creation and all that. And part of it is there's different steps in terms of developing the business plan, coming up with the idea, et cetera, et cetera. And at each stage, I've developed a rubric which has, here are the criteria. And for each criteria, there are 5 levels you grade on, basically. And I can give the student feedback on each step they're doing. So I'm giving them stronger guidance throughout the process, so that at the end of the course, they've come up with an idea that's a real winner. And, what you're trying to do with your system, I think, is create a guide that gives them winners. So you want to stop the process early on if they're off of the railroad tracks and coming up with some stupid stuff. You want to give them some guidance in terms of what they should be looking for, what they should be aiming towards to do, which in my case, when I'm writing something, I want a 10 out of 10 of all my criteria.
Well, let me ask you a question, Brad. In
Sure.
your process, in your students' process of them putting their first manuscript together, how long do they take?
Well, of course, this is a business plan, which is a little different, right? So
Mhm.
I have them break it down by individual sections. So I have a, company overview, an industry analysis, a market analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And each step, I'm giving them the rubric for that particular thing. So to twist that around to what you're doing, I'd say, the steps are, the research you're going to do, what niche you want to go to. It's going to be who are the best in that niche that you can emulate and come up with prompts like your Hemingway prompt. It would be, you know, whatever steps there are within this process, however detailed you want to make it. And I would guide them along the way so that they're always on the right track and they're learning as they're going through that. Okay, my first time I didn't do so on my second book. I know now what I'm trying to come up with on the overall picture, and therefore I can cut through a lot and improve. And where I see the strength of your application is not necessarily the first book you're coming up with, but it's the process of teaching them what they can do and teaching them to get better and better over time.
Okay, so what I would say is this. Um, Depending on the book, the character development, etc., right? I mean, if it was just a how-to book and I wanted to address all the characters and whatnot, my first manuscript, uh, we did it rather complicated in that one. You saw that there were a lot of different characters that came up in that outline, and that prompt gave me a list of those characters that I could have gone and added to that. But bottom line, I probably could have added those characters in and been to my first manuscript before I went to do any of my quality control um, in the 2 hour mark as opposed to the 2 month mark. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So the process becomes a little bit different because now they get to evaluate the whole thing at once. And one of the things when you go and you take a look at it, when it's testing the quality of the manuscript, it's looking for one of the things that it looks for is marketability.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it a legitimate metric? Is how it figures it out legitimate? You could figure that out better than I could. I mean, if somebody was asking me, I've been through this a lot of times in the last, I don't know, 20 years, because we didn't have these kind of writing capabilities now. So there were other ways that you would approach it. Um, but when you're like, as an example, like the way I used to tell people to do it. Have you ever heard of copy talk?
Coffee Talk,
Yeah,
COFF.
COPYTALK.
No, I haven't.
Right, they're a service in the U.S. and they're tied to your cell phone number, right? And so what you want to do is you want to come up with 12 chapters. And if somebody was looking for how to research those 12 chapters, I would tell them, okay, you go to Amazon and you go to the Books for Dummies website where you can see all of those chapters, right? Because generally they're fairly well researched before a publisher is going to invest in them, and it needs to be covered. And then you have your 12 chapters, and then you get on your cell phone and you call Copy Talk, and you could talk for up to 4 minutes at a time, and then you hang up and you can call back immediately and continue what you're saying. You can do that all you want. It was completely unlimited for $79 a month. And somebody at the other end would transcribe what you said and send it back to you. So you get this very raw manuscript, right? And if you spend 15 minutes on each chapter, uh, over 12 chapters, you come up with what's roughly a 200-page book. You follow me? So it's just a
Mhm.
different process of how you did your research and whatnot. And that's not a bad process today in terms of figuring out what potentially could sell, right? Um, but it's just not. It's. I haven't got into that area of it yet. I hadn't even really considered about getting into that area. Uh, but perhaps I should. We've
You know
got
what you can do?
lots of
What you can do?
Saturdays coming.
Sure. What you can do, I don't want to keep you much longer, so I'll just throw this out. What you can do is NVIDIA came out with this speech to text free tool that's pretty good apparently in terms of doing this. And you could have an application component of your system, which is being able to capture notes that are spoken to your phone or whatever, transcribe that, and then pull it together. So rather than using CopyTalk, you can basically displace that service with your application. Might be something interesting for you. It's
Well,
easy
you're
to do.
absolutely right. And if I were to show you the research that was done on Perplexity today,
Mhm.
one of the things that it comes up and it's specifically talking about is nobody is giving you the opportunity to talk to the software. So
Exactly.
because some people are very good verbal storytellers, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So
And you see, that's the direction that everybody, all the LLMs are trying to get to, which is the audio interface, and it's certainly a very powerful component.
yeah, yeah, and that may end up coming in there. Right now, what I'm being told by the AI is that the current growth rate in this market is 20% year over year. And
Mhm.
I suspect it's actually going to go a bit faster than that. You've got a lot of people who resist the idea of writing with AI. Personally, I think they're a bunch of Facebook people who probably don't write anything or produce anything anyway, and they're just trying to sound like the in crowd.
That's
This.
fine. Leave them behind.
Well, exactly. The same folks who would use an axe instead of a chainsaw. That's what I like that.
Yeah, the
Uh,
thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's all right. Go ahead.
The thing I like to try to do whenever I'm developing applications for clients or whatever is to come up with a scientific approach or best practice. How I'm going to create the best output. And to me, um, part of that is to give people the freedom to talk to something to brainstorm. I love Gemini on my smartphone because I can have a conversation with it. And this is the same type of capability now you can start to build into your applications. And to me, it's a no-brainer.
See, they're even talking about in this report that it filed for me. They're even talking about putting sensors on people to get their response to the story elements. This is obviously a bit further than I'm looking to go,
Hmm.
but there are reams of things that haven't been truly explored yet. And yes, and I may put my marketing hat on. We did do one thing, and I talked about this. I don't know if you were here when I talked about it, but on the outline page itself, there's a place where you can push a button, and it'll come up with the sales copy of your book.
Hmm.
Okay, and it'll do it in the style and the words of Dan Kennedy. I could have just as easily used John Carlton or one of the other major copywriters, right? Kennedy was on my mind that day, and so you've got a sales page, and And I says, okay, what about a place to put that sales page? So we went and we created outside of this system. We created a system that will allow you to build the page, all of the HTML and whatnot, right? Drag and drop. Then I says, okay, well, what about flipbooks? I really like the flipbook format, right? And so we actually have we built our own flipbook creator, you know, that we're handing out to the people who are subscribers. But although I will tell you up front that there are people, in my view, do a better job of how the flipbook looks. I haven't got that perfected yet. But anyway. So that's kind of where all this is. I hope you folks found this to be worth your time. I hope you learned something, good, bad, indifferent. And we'll be back here next Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern with a whole nother topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
You're
Good luck
very
to you.
welcome.
Really like what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Let's see if I can turn my recording off.